Hello, everyone. This is Ashish Kutiala. Welcome to the group conversation for the Strategic Marketing Department. In the agenda, the slides have been linked, and there's a place to put your questions in as per the format, and we will answer it there so that everybody can benefit from it if they cannot attend today's meeting. So Sid, you have the first question. And your question is on slide 10, what was missing from our vision? So do you mind verbalizing and clarifying which one of the two reports you're talking about?
Yeah, so this is about the Gartner Magic Quadrant for critical capabilities for application release orchestration. Try saying that 3 times fast. And I think it's a great result that we are a challenger in this market. We're in a distinguished company. And for example, a great company like Chef is a niche player. Well, we are a challenger. So I think it was a great outcome. But of course, like we always want more. So what was... We're not a leader because we're not. The vision could be more complete. So what are they wanting to see there?
Thank you for the question. I'd like to have Colin Fletcher answer this question. As you know, that Colin was responsible for this Magic Quadrant, the previous version before he joined the company. So he kind of knows the criteria and what would be missing in the vision exactly a lot better than us. Colin, if you mind verbalizing that accurately, that would be great.
Sure, it's to the best of my ability anyway, and of course, based on the information that that we can work with. I'll oversimplify a bit. I think the biggest difference here, impacting our vision, is frankly our support for traditional and legacy applications and workflows. That's the primary differentiator between the vendors who tend to score well across the vision axis versus the execution axis. And one of the distinguishing features of the application release orchestration market, as defined by Gartner and their enterprise requirements, versus something like a CI/CD oriented analysis, which is focused on those kinds of workflows. So that's the primary difference in our opinion as to what likely impacted our vision score is supporting a broader array of platforms, working styles, and applications.
And Colin, we should also state that this is the last time that the Magic Quadrant for ARO will be published.
Correct. Yeah. This is Gartner did announce that this is the final application release orchestration comparative research iterations. They have not yet announced what may or may not show up next.
Cool. Thanks for that.
Next, we have a question again from you, Sid.
I want to call out the irony that we're missing vision because we're not supporting legacy stuff. There's a tension there.
I'm glad you got that.
Well, and it's about, but to be fair, right, this is representative of enterprise requirements, right? So they've got to manage things. They've got to manage both portfolios for.
No, and for certain, and we could do better there, and we should do better there. And but it's when you only have 2 axes, their meaning gets a bit overloaded. On slide 13, that's requests from the CAB, and one is Internet as Code as a first-class integration. Can someone elaborate what kind of?
I think that is infrastructure as code.
Oh, infrastructure. Sorry, infrastructure as code.
And I was not present, unfortunately, at the CAB in person. Colin and Dan, you were there to lead the discussions, and some of the product managers were there as well. So if you don't mind double clicking, the collected results are linked from the slide or in-depth at the bottom of the slide on the left side. There's a link where you can actually go see in-depth results and who voted how on that. But if there can be commentary by any of the product managers who were there, or Colin or Dan, that would be great.
I think I'll put a wrapper out, and then other folks can add in. I know at least one of the threads that led to, some of those inputs and those discussions around infrastructure as code, frankly, were economically oriented. We had a few customers in the room that were faced with new pricing models being introduced by some of the infrastructure as code vendors or CCA vendors like Chef, HashiCorp, and others. And to many of them, they were actually looking at us as potentially providing some of the, or adding some of the capabilities at a better value point than from those vendors directly. I don't know if Dan or anybody else wanted to. That was just one of the threads on that line. I think the other assumption is of course it is important. It's part of each of these implementations, at least among the CAB members. There is an infrastructure as code capability in use under most circumstances, and they felt like we could do a better job of adding value around that.
Yeah, I would agree with that about making it more of a kind of first-class citizen in our product. The notion of that there is infrastructure as code, that it represents infrastructure. As well, there was also some talk around the notion of using process SCM and whatnot to process infrastructure as code as well.
Then we get a bit more. Can we get some examples? Like what is it that they want? Make sure that there's no two Terraforms deploys running at the same time, or what are we talking about here?
Hey, Sid, Kenny Johnston, Director of Product for Ops. I also read through this feedback, and Victor, our product manager who covers infrastructure as code, has reached out to the specific attendees. He wasn't there either, but we're following up.
Cool. When those results are in, I'd love to hear more. Thanks.
Cool. Will do.
Kenny, you mind verbalizing your question next?
Yeah, and I appreciate the chance to verbalize it, because I also want to say kudos to the analyst engagement team. Literally never worked with a team as robust and efficient and widespread as what we have here. And like, it's amazing on a daily basis. Me and the product management team get to interact with analysts on a totally different level, not just reacting to them publishing reports, but also doing inquiries and stuff. And so kudos to that team. I know that I recall, I think it was in a group conversation probably 6 to 9 months ago, we talked about and had an effort to identify all, as we expand our breadth, all the various places where we wanted to prepare to compete and compete when it came to analyst categories. I'm just wondering, like, is there an overview or a place where we can kind of keep track of how that's going?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give the overarching answer of the direction. I'd love for Joyce or Colin, and actually Ryan has just joined the team. You can put him on the spot and say what he thinks. But our goal has been to both expand the coverage across what we call the different stages that we call out, but as well as depth, because there are reports that cover specific stages, but there's reports that cover across stages, as well as certain use cases, that problems that customers are trying to solve. And we are increasing the number of briefings and inquiries. We just had a discussion yesterday that inquiries are going really well. We should put a focus back on seeing where the holes are and how we can expand that coverage even more. Briefing is the act where you go and get time in front. I'm saying this, Kenny, for everybody else, in front of analysts, and you tell them, you sell them the vision of what we are doing, what we're headed, and where we think we are strong and why. And inquiry is more a closed session in confidence where you can ask them questions about other competitors, about the market, about our product, what they think. And so we tend to do both. And the more you do that, the more analysts come to know you. And we are also participating in a number of analyst industry events so that there's more exposure, because we have meetings with analysts in these events, etc. So as of last count, I think we are well over about 12 major reports. It might be even more now, which means Magic Quadrants, waves from Foresters, etc. And we are well over 95 was the last count I remember, analyst reports that we have been mentioned in. And, this is a result of, I would say, the last 12 to 16 months that we put the effort. And we continue to kind of like push towards this. Maybe it's a good metric to track where, how are we increasing this and in a time period from, every quarter, how does this number go up, or new mentions, etc. Colin, Joyce, if you want to add something.
Yeah, so it is something. So yeah, in short, totally agree. The kind of the analyst page. I think I saw John adding that to the elements where you can kind of keep an eye on or a general analyst page on our website. Our growing kind of span. We are in the process of creating a more intentional programmatic plan for exploiting and broadening our coverage with regards to impact as well. So there is it's still in early stages. How that ends up manifesting from both an external and an internal perspective is still something that we're still fairly early in figuring out. We also utilize some other tools specific to the analyst relations industry or discipline. Hey, William, we can hear you. But it's something that's going well. As Ashish noted, we've grown significantly, but we are trying to focus on as well an impact measure. As we brought Ryan on board, one of the things that I'm not going to make him talk about it right now is the next level of a model for optimizing our time spent in different markets as well. I don't know if that answered your question, Kenny, but
Yeah,
happy to talk about it more.
it does, and glad to hear that that page certainly shows me that there have been a lot of great results. And
Thank
like
you,
I said,
Kenny.
beyond just the showing up in reports, the product management team gets a ton of value out of the inquiries and engagement from the analyst relations team.
So happy to help.
If I can add something, the second word in analyst relations is relations, and sort of the popular thing to do is measure the exposure. But equally important is the insight that brings. And what I have seen transpire, because I've sat in all of these inquiries in the period that Ashish is referring to, we've gone from having to say, hey, have you ever heard of GitLab? Do you know GitLab? Here's some things. I think, Kenny, you sat in at least one of the two inquiries we had today. We've got another one as soon as this call ends. In both the inquiries I had this week with analysts that we've developed those relationships, they were asking us as many questions as we were asking them, which says that they are no longer just politely answering our questions. They're thinking about us. They're working with us. So some of that, and this is part of what Ryan and Colin and I are working on, is how do you measure that insight? So for example, at the end of an inquiry, we always have those key takeaways that we try to capture. That becomes some of that information about what did we get, how did that move us forward. Kenny, I know you have the PMs try and make an MR into their vision, into what they're doing. That says, aha, here's what I've got. So it's some of those things as well that are small and incremental, but over time show us the bigger trajectory.
Thank you, Joyce. I think I just want to add one more point. I know we've talked a lot about this, but as a matter of feeling very proud as a GitLab employee, and especially of the AR team, what has started to happen, and we're keeping a track of this, is analysts are actually turning to us in confidence on guiding them. So when they have to talk to another vendor, or when they have to create a new category, or they have to do some new research, they're actually turning to our team to reach out and ask us our guidance on how they should approach something. And that is a very fundamental kind of pivot point where we have gone to like telling every analyst, hey, listen to us, we're GitLab, we're new, kid on the block, and you should know what we do, to, hey, GitLab, how do you think this market is changing? How do you think we should approach this research? So that is really great for us, and it'll allow us to achieve more results. So having said that, and it's a lot to do with the AR team and the product managers and the product marketing managers, thank you for continuing to support us. I want to go to the next question to John Cogman.
Hey everyone, just curious if you could shed a little bit of light on what the LearnAgate Lab MBC is. It's mentioned on slide 14, but I don't see any like links or anything to dig a bit deeper. But I'm just curious what that MVC is going to be, and if there's any links or relevant things, it would be great to see them in the notes.
So John, I'll start the answer. I know Dan, okay, Dan can come off mute, so I'll let him answer. This is something he's creating. Go ahead.
Sorry, getting the kids ready for the day. Yeah, so good question. Yeah, I failed to put Epic in there, but I'll get that done today. It's something we've been kind of quietly talking about, checking with people the idea of, and the notion is that right now on the front of our website, we really don't have a portal into technical content. We do want it spread throughout, but we also want a place where people who are coming to learn deeper about GitLab can actually go and get content that's curated about how to go about exploring GitLab. And so the intent here is to start putting that together, and that'll be, of course, a collaboration with all the content providers. So it's to make a place for all that to be, so people can find it.
That sounds great. Is there a longer term vision to have something like, you know, some kind of training or certification or something like the Salesforce, I think it's called Trailblazers program? Is this like an MBC as a step towards that?
It can certainly go there. Right now, the idea is to get our content corralled together and a single point where people can come for this kind of information. I could certainly see it extending to that, and I think there's other groups looking at that as well. So we'll come together and collaborate on that. Right now, we want to just get the content to do into one place where people can find and explore and discover.
So Dan, to add to that, and John, that's certainly something that's in the vision at a longer horizon, but that'd be something we would work with David Summers, for example, in the enablement team, because we have to put together a program on how to measure, test, certify, and keep that up to date. We have talked about it, but you know, I think this is not a high priority for that team. I don't know if David is on the call and he can answer for himself, but certainly to answer your question, it's in the vision. It's not something we will drive, but we'll work very closely with the enablement team to drive. I don't believe
and just to play off of that, the demand is clearly there. If you look at our top performing websites, the number of web pages, I think 5 and 6 are both pages in documentation about how to do things in Git. They're educational nature about how to do things in Git as opposed to anything else. I think, and they're in the top 10 consistently. So there's demand for that content.
We have about 8 minutes. Love to have more questions. I know we get a lot of questions in Slack and different mediums, emails. So please use this opportunity. Sid, do you have any additional questions as well?
If we're going to make that technical content, how we're going to make sure that it doesn't overlap with like the documentation we already have?
We'll be looking at the documentation and working with the documentation team too. I think they need, yeah, certainly. I think, as you pointed out in the past, I think we shouldn't have boring documentation either, right? So we shouldn't be against pointing to content that is a video of someone doing something, for example. I think we do that today some. So we'll coordinate so where it's appropriate to leverage off the work that each other are doing. We'll do that.
Cool. And yeah, as John mentioned, I'm super psyched about having a certification program. I think that will be a major help. I think there's a lot of demand from customers for it. I think we need it ourselves. So the sooner we can get to that, the better.
Agreed.
I don't have any more questions. I'm happy to talk about any of the slides here if somebody wants me to elaborate on that. I think one of the exciting things as a release we have that a lot of us should take the time to read is the book that Cindy has written with the help of O'Reilly. If you're not a good expert in security, that book at least gives you a good framework. It's got a lot of GitLab content in it that we talk about, plus her own views. It's an easy read. I think it's something that everybody can imbibe and weave it into your conversations and your work if you're not that conversant with security. So that's something I'd like to point out. I think we're very excited about some of the work that we're doing with partners that's covered in slide 16. The Tanuki adventure with the pins at past events. I can talk about what that is. It doesn't quite explain here, but it was very, very popular. So Tina and team and the events team had some pins that are magnetic that you can put on your shirt or your clothing, made and distributed to different partners that work with us. For you to earn those pins, you actually had to go to each one of those partners and learn about GitLab and their product, their company, and the integration, and then come back with a stamp that you had talked to them or collect the pin from them. And you had to go and talk to each partner on the show floor to learn about GitLab's integrations, and you would earn the complete slate of 8 pins. That is going to be 14 pins, I believe, in the AWS reInvent and KubeCon day, which means everybody who comes to us will end up going to 14 partners and learning about how we work with them from a technology perspective. What integration do we have? What value do we have? How can they, take leverage of that, and then earn all 14 pins? It seems that these pins are very much in demand. They're very cool to kind of collect. It's a collector's item kind of a theme going on. So we had an overrush of like everyone coming in wanting to know us. Really good for us. Very unique way to kind of educate people who attend the conference about all our partners and integrations. So I think that's very cool. I wanted to talk about that. Do I see any questions?
Yes, can I ask a question? Can I find a Gartner report for the 2019, the quadrant you showed where GitLab is showing in the leadership, but not placed? It's placed kind of like in the top left quadrant. Is there a report attached to that I can get access?
It should be linked right from the slides.
Okay, thank you.
And if it's not, we link it. It should be linked from our analyst page on the handbook or the website, and you can access it from there.
I will also put an internal link in because we're still working on. So we have reprint rights to it, but that reprint we're still in the works on that. So I will put our internal copy on. So you can look at it now. If you're in sales, if you need to share it with a customer, come see me so I can get you the official link to share. But the one I'll put in the document here is our internal copy.
Oh yes, I want to clarify something what Joyce said. So also, thank you very much for putting the link in the chat. There are 3 kinds of links. One is directly to the Gartner site because they always host their own reports, and you have to pay to be able to access them. When we buy the rights, we host them and we give it away if you give us your name and email address, because that's a way for us to know who's downloading the report and follow up with them. And then for us internally, it's in a Google Doc folder so that we don't have to register to see it if we need to take it to a customer. The easiest way to find this is on our webpage because it's there. That's the single source of truth. Only the internal copy, if you need that, you can look it up in the Google folder. It's the same report.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, Ashish. This is William. And one of the elements on the slider that's had some discussion recently has been coordinating go-to-market around use cases. And I was wondering if you or maybe John or the team could just chat a little bit about how that's going and what some of the vision and implications are there.
John, I would like
you. No, I got it. Yeah, I'll jump on it. So, we've been looking really closely at we've been doing a couple of things, one around force management, command of the message, and value drivers, which help to communicate and help us to organize messaging around why people buy, GitLab. What problem are they trying to solve, or what's the reason, the rationale? And it's always driven based upon one of three different things, either risk or being faster, delivering quality for products faster, or being more efficient, reducing cost. But what the value drivers don't get to is exactly what are they going to do when they roll out GitLab? What specific thing are they going to do? And in talking to customers and listening to the field and looking at data in Salesforce, we've identified a handful of specific use cases customer use cases that are what people typically do. And the top two are source code management. They start there, or they start with CI. There's another handful, a group of them that where they typically will roll out GitLab to do, CD and release, or they'll be doing end-to-end DevOps. There's a handful that are trying to do Agile and project management when they roll out GitLab. So we've identified, I think at this point, we worked on this 8 specific use cases where we know people have been buying GitLab. One of them is infrastructure as code. The use case that came out of the cab where customers are using GitLab to manage their scripts that you're using to define how they manage their infrastructure. And so by identifying these patterns of which people are buying and why they're buying, it gives us the vehicle then to build out a buyer's journey and collateral and content and messaging that talks to that and allows us people what they're looking for, that specific use case, that specific solution that can lead them to understanding what we do at GitLab and how GitLab can help. So that's a quick summary of it. We're looking at how do we work with campaigns and go to market, and we're working our way through that process of doing that. And it helps us to focus on what customers are asking for. Thanks, William.
Thank you, John. We are at the end of time, so I would like to thank everybody for attending this call. As always, please reach out to us on our Slack channel or directly to us. We're happy to answer any questions. Thank you for attending.